It has been a busy 2 weeks for the man who appears to be the underdog in the race for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. 30-year-old Cincinnati City Councilman P.G. Sittenfeld said this week he is challenging his opponent, former Governor Ted Strickland, to a series of 6 what he calls issue-oriented debates in Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Toledo, Youngstown, and Dayton, starting on July 4th. But a spokesperson for Strickland says Sittenfeld has not contacted the campaign about the proposal. Last week, Sittenfeld was in Columbus to deliver a speech that his campaign said affirms his candidacy for U.S. Senate, even as the party has officially endorsed Strickland. Sittenfeld talked on the State House steps about the new ideas and perspective he says he brings to the campaign and said Ohioans deserve the chance to vote for him. After that speech, he sat down with me to talk about the campaign and why he's in it. So you were the first Democrat out of the gate in January into this race after weeks of comments from pundits and journalists like me who had said that the Democrats, after what happened last November, needed to start thinking about the race for 2016. You came out and said that you were in the race.
Yeah.
So what made you want to jump into it?
I think a lot of things, but the first thing, I talk to folks every week, both around Ohio and in my hometown, Cincinnati, where I have the honor of being an elected leader. I talk to young people who want more educational opportunity in their future. I talk to families and to parents who are making very real dinner table decisions about, do you buy medication or do you get groceries? Talk to seniors who, after working hard their entire life, want to be able to retire in dignity and with comfort. And those all feel increasingly elusive. And I think there's an overwhelming sense amongst the majority of people I talk to that Washington is broken. And I think the only way to fix it is by sending some new faces and some fresh voices. So, so much of the thrust of our candidacy is that there is a urgent need for a new generation of leadership to step up. And I want to put the focus in this race on the future. Let's have a conversation about how we get from where we are to where we want to go, instead of letting this be a stale argument about the past. And I think that's what the voters want too.
Now, you're such a new face that the Quinnipiac poll in April found that 89% of Ohioans have never heard of you.
Sure.
So how do you change that?
Sure, and that comes as no surprise. But that's why you run a campaign, right? I think the pundits and the polls 20 months out doesn't usually look like how things end up by election day. So I've probably been to about 20 different counties in the last month, and whether it's big urban counties or smaller rural counties, we've gotten a great response everywhere we've gone. So I'm certainly going to be putting in the sweat equity. And look, it does take a level of resources to run an effective, successful race. We led the Democratic field in fundraising in the first quarter. We posted a number that stands up very well in U.S. Senate races nationally. But I think, Karen, more than anything else, you win because you have the right message and you're the right person for the moment. And I think the right message in 2016, what voters are looking for, is new leadership, new ideas, and a focus on the future, not the past.
Let's talk a little bit more about that Quinnipiac poll. We'll come back to the money question in a minute. But that Quinnipiac poll also looked at the other candidate in the race, who is, of course, former Governor Ted Strickland. That poll in April had him beating incumbent Republican Rob Portman 48% to 39%. That same poll had you losing to Portman 47% to 24%. Sure. Those numbers don't suggest that you'll do very well in this race, but you did point out that this is a long way from the actual contest.
Again, that poll really came as no surprise to us. It was a 20 months out name ID poll, and the reality is Ted Strickland has a lot of name ID. Rob Portman has a lot of name ID, though less than Ted Strickland. I don't have a lot of name ID. So this is about sharing our message, spreading our vision, getting known across the state. That's why you run a campaign, and we look forward to seeing everybody at the finish line.
Now, I need to ask you about Strickland being endorsed by the Ohio Democratic Party, which is an unusual move here, since there would be a primary if you are both still in the race as of next year. He also seems to have the support of some national and statewide Democratic figures. So how do you fight an uphill battle against someone who already comes into the primary with this kind of support?
Yeah, I think you do it in a very simple way, and that's always remembering that the people decide elections, voters decide elections. So, so much of why I'm in this race, in addition to, believing in standing up for women making their own healthcare decisions and building a fair economy and taking climate change seriously and making sure that more bad trade deals don't hurt Ohio workers. In addition to all of those things, I'm also proud to be giving voters a voice and a choice in this election. I trust people and have a lot of faith in their common sense that they can make their own decision. They don't need sort of big shots and poobahs telling them that they know better than they know for themselves who their nominee should be. So I look forward to making my case directly to the voters, and as I've said, they've been very supportive so far.
Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the differences between you and Governor Strickland, based not only on your viewpoints, which I want to get to, but also on the kind of differences in the party that you represent. I mean, there are some who say that he's kind of the old guard or the trusted, experienced
experienced wing of the party. You're newer, younger, with different ideas, younger ideas. You even said that yourself, kind of. If you stay in the race, though, doesn't that threaten to divide the party at a time when the party needs to be coming together to elect a president and a senator?
I would actually say the opposite, and I would look to Ohio history as evidence that when we look at some of our great Democratic Ohio leaders, John Glenn, Howard Metzenbaum, Dick Celeste, these are all folks who were tested and strengthened and emerged stronger in the general election. So, I don't think Democrats ever need to fear a contest of ideas. So I think folks want to be galvanized. They want to be energized. I think, I'm certainly going to reach out to voters across the entire spectrum, but I think in particular, young people will be energized, and all of that will help the nominee. I look forward to being our party's nominee, but I also think that the Democratic Party should not shy away from a democratic process. And if we look at Ohio history, those who have gone on to ultimately win emerged from primaries.
If you do indeed win, would it change the course of the Democratic Party? Would it change? I mean, you had some support, I think, maybe you didn't expect it necessarily, from Supreme Court Justice Bill O'Neill, who was saying that Democrats need to leave the party. The inmates are running the asylum. Would it change the party if you were to win?
Look, I think what people want is they want to see government that looks like what they look like. So I feel passionately that the United States Senate and all other wings of government need more women. They need more minorities. Also, yes, we need more young people. I come from the biggest and most technologically savvy generation in American history, and yet we have zero representation in the United States Senate. So I think a big part of how it could change not just the Democratic Party, but the makeup of the country is offering these fresh perspectives. One of my sisters, who is a novelist for her career, wrote a piece about why she supports her brother in the Huffington Post, and one of the things she said is, it might actually be kind of refreshing to have a few senators who actually knew how to send their own tweets, which is sort of, I think, shorthand for a bigger point about the world is changing, right? The old ways won't necessarily do moving forward, and there's so much we can do to harness the power of technology and innovation to solve problems. And, I don't want the conversation around something like climate change to be the conversation from 10 years ago. Let's look forward. How can we create jobs? How can we sort of move forward in a sustainable planet? How can we take the recovery that we're experiencing in our economy and reinvest it in working families? How can we make sure that young people who we encourage to go out and get an education are then, when they get that education, liberated to get married, buy that first house, invest in their local community, rather than being crushed beneath a mountain of student loan debt? So I think we've got the right ideas, and I'm going to spread them as far and wide as I can.
Some of those ideas you just previewed there, this whole progressive agenda that you've talked about,
absolutely.
On things like what you just said, on income inequality, on gun control. Those are just a couple of examples. You've mentioned a couple other ones here. You've also said the state doesn't need two Republican parties, right, that your agenda is different, the things that you believe in may be different than Ted Strickland's. But is that a winning strategy in a state that just reelected Republicans in a landslide, both at the 5 executive office level and in the House, and also in a state where we haven't had 2 Democratic senators since the days of Glenn and Metzenbaum back in the late 80s?
And I think a lot of folks are nostalgic and miss those days of Glenn and Metzenbaum together representing Ohio.
This state kind of is moderate to leaning right, isn't it? Or is it?
Look, I think if you give people something to vote for, if you say we can actually, have government leaders that improve your day-to-day life, doing things like raising the minimum wage, like expanding the earned income tax credit, like paid sick leave and family leave. If you give people something to vote for, that on the economic side, I think you can change the nature of the electorate. So I actually would, instead of the folks that you mentioned, say Barack Obama carried the state of Ohio twice. Sherrod Brown, no one's been more successful sort of in the modern era than Senator Brown. And I think these are folks that are unabashed about offering an agenda that works for working people. I'm going to do the same.
And of course, the big question in this race, too, is money. Whoever is going to be in this race needs a lot of it.
Sure.
You've raised a fair amount. So has Ted Strickland. Mm-hmm. Rob Portman has outraised all of you.
Sure.
So how do you compete against Rob Portman and the money that he already brings into the race, as well as the money that he's going to attract?
Yeah, so a couple pieces. One, frankly, Rob Portman needs a lot of money. He needs a lot of money to paper over a bad record. If I were Rob Portman, if you look at Rob Portman, the architect of the Bush-era budget before the economy goes over the cliff, U.S. trade rep when the trade deficit with China explodes, voting against equal pay for equal work, voting against the minimum wage. Rob Portman has a long record, and it's not long in a good way. It's long in a bad way. It's going to take a lot of money to try and convince the voters otherwise. In terms of my own candidacy, we went out and we led the Democratic field in the first quarter of fundraising. We had folks, everyone from the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, to grassroots donors across the state, investing in my vision, investing in our campaign. So I feel confident we're going to have the resources to run the kind of campaign that we want to run, that we need to run. That doesn't mean matching Rob Portman or even Ted Strickland dollar for dollar. It means having enough money to share your message when it's the right message.
And finally, you say you're in this race because you have something to offer. But couldn't you get out of this race and go into another race that the Democrats might need, say, in 2018, when there's going to be 5 executive offices that are going to be open in terms of the current occupants can't rerun for them? Why stay in this race, and are you getting pressure to leave this race?
Yeah, frankly, I mean, I think there are those who sort of say, wait your turn. I'm running this race for people whose turn never seems to come, right? I mean, this race is not about me. It's about the urgency of the issues we've discussed. It's about the young people and the moms and dads and the seniors across the state who they can't wait 2 more years or let alone 10 more years. So I'm looking forward to being their advocate in their race, offering a progressive agenda, offering an agenda that works for working people, and representing our state in the United States Senate starting in winning in 2016 and starting to represent them in 2017.
Are you in the primary till the primary? Are you in this race till the
We
primary?
are full speed ahead to win this race and represent Ohio in the United States Senate.
Would you consider getting out of this race to run for something else?
No, I'm running to be Ohio's next United States Senator, and I look forward to continuing the momentum we've got already.
Couldn't be clearer than that. Thank
Great.
you very
Thank
much,
you so
PG
much.
Sittenfeld.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
I should note that Ted Strickland's campaign was contacted and offered an opportunity to sit down for a discussion on this show. I was told in an email by his spokesman, quoting here, he'd really like to come on, but it's so early in the campaign and he's focused on talking with voters and building his campaign infrastructure right now. The spokesman also said there might be a chance to talk with Strickland later this summer. I'll keep you posted.